one family, one birthright worth $1 billion, and one brother who never saw the betrayal coming until it was already too late to reverse it. But before we open this case file, I need you to understand something that most Bible teachers will never tell you. This story is not in the Bible to inspire you. It is in the Bible to indict you. And by the time this case closes, you will never read Genesis chapters 25 through 27 the same way again. This is the Biblefile. And today we open the complete forensic investigation on the most sophisticated inheritance fraud in human history. Let us start where every serious financial crime investigation starts, with the asset, because you cannot understand binding financial instrument with the full weight of covenant law behind it. The firstborn son received a double portion of the entire family estate upon the father's death. He became the head of the household. The spiritual authority over the family lineage passed to him. The covenant promises spoken over the family, every divine agreement made between God and the patriarch, transferred to him. In a household as wealthy as Isaac's, this was not a small matter. Isaac had inherited the full fortune of Abraham. And Abraham was not just a man of faith, he was one of the wealthiest individuals in the entire ancient world. Scripture records that Abraham had vast herds of livestock, silver, gold, servants, wells, land agreements, and military alliances with kings. When he died, everything transferred to Isaac, and Isaac multiplied it. Genesis 26 records that in a single year, Isaac sowed crops in a famine and reaped 100-fold return. He accumulated flocks, herds, and a great household until the Philistines were envious of him. In today's financial terms, we are not talking about a comfortable inheritance. We are talking about a generational empire worth hundreds of millions, conservatively estimated in the billions of dollars when land holdings, livestock herds, silver, gold, and household assets are calculated at modern valuations. The birthright was the legal deed to all of it, and Jacob wanted every single dollar. Now let us examine the suspect profile, because understanding who Jacob was before the crime tells us everything about how the crime was committed. Jacob and Esau were twins, but from the moment of their birth, they were in competition. Genesis records that Esau came out first, red, hairy, and physically dominant. Jacob came out second, his hand gripping his brother's heel as if even in the womb he was trying to pull him back. His name means deceiver, or supplanter, or one who grabs the heel. His parents named him after the act of grasping what belonged to someone else. That is not coincidence. That is character established before his first breath. Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the fields, physically powerful, emotionally immediate, living entirely in the present tense. He was Isaac's favorite, the kind of son who brought home fresh game and filled the tent with the smell of the outdoors and his father's approval. Jacob was different. He was a quiet man who stayed close to the tents. He watched, he calculated. He was his mother Rebekah's favorite, and Rebekah was a woman of strategic intelligence who understood that in the game of patriarchal inheritance, patience and positioning mattered more than physical strength. Jacob had been studying his brother for years before the first transaction. He knew exactly who Esau was. He knew exactly when Esau would break. The first crime scene opens on what appears to be an ordinary afternoon. Esau returns from hunting. He has been out in the fields for hours, possibly days. He is exhausted. His body is shutting down. The text uses language that suggests extreme physical depletion. Esau described himself as dying, though most scholars interpret this as dramatic expression of desperate hunger rather than literal threat to life. Jacob is at the tent, cooking, a rich red lentil stew, thick, fragrant, warm. And Esau looked at that pot and said, "Give me some of that red stuff. I am dying. Stop the investigation right here." Because what happens in the next 60 seconds is not impulsive on Jacob's part. This is the moment Jacob has been waiting for. The specific moment when the most valuable asset in the ancient Near East would be most vulnerable to acquisition. Jacob did not offer his brother food out of compassion. He looked at his exhausted, depleted, emotionally compromised brother, and he made his move. Sell me your birthright, today, right now. Esau's response reveals everything about why Jacob selected this moment with forensic precision. Esau said, "Look, I am about to die. What use is a birthright to me? A man who can ask that question about a billion-dollar inheritance is a man who has never truly understood what he is holding. And Jacob knew it. He had always known it. He pressed further. Swear to me first. He did not accept a casual agreement. He required a sworn legal oath, the ancient equivalent of a signed and witnessed contract. Under covenant law in the ancient Near East, that oath was irrevocable. Once sworn, it could not be undone. Esau swore. The asset transferred. Jacob handed his brother bread and lentil stew. Esau ate, he drank, he stood up, he walked away. And the Bible? Esau despised his birthright. Not sold reluctantly, not surrendered under genuine duress, despised. The Hebrew word means to treat something as worthless, to hold in contempt, to consider beneath consideration. Esau did not lose the birthright because Jacob was clever. Esau lost the birthright because he never believed it was real. But Jacob was not finished, because the birthright transferred the financial inheritance, but the blessing was something entirely different. The patriarchal blessing was the spoken covenant activation. It was the moment when the father looked at his son, invoked the name of God, and transferred divine favor, spiritual authority, and covenant identity onto the next generation. The blessing was not a legal document. It was a declaration over destiny, and once spoken, it carried the full weight of God's covenant purposes for the family line. Without the blessing, the birthright was incomplete. Jacob needed both, and getting the blessing required an operation of an entirely different level of sophistication. Years pass. Isaac is old. His eyes are dim. The text tells us he could no longer see. He believes he is near death and calls his firstborn son Esau to him. The instruction is precise. Go out to the field, hunt game, prepare my favorite meal, bring it to me, and I will give you my soul's blessing before I die. This is meant to be a private transaction, a final moment between a dying father and his eldest son, sacred, irrevocable, behind closed doors. But Rebekah was listening, and the moment Esau left for the field, the second operation began. Jacob's mother was not a passive participant in what followed. She was the architect. She had clearly been waiting for this moment, perhaps for years. Her instructions to Jacob were operational in their precision. Get 2 young goats from the flock. Bring them to me. I will prepare them exactly the way your father loves. You will carry the food to him. He will bless you instead of your brother. Jacob raised one objection. Not, this is wrong. Not, we cannot deceive my dying father. His only concern was detection risk. What if he touches me? Esau is hairy and I am smooth. If my father realizes I am deceiving him, I will bring a curse on myself rather than a blessing. This is the forensic signature of a man already committed to the crime. His risk assessment was not moral, it was operational. Rebekah had already calculated for every variable. She took Esau's best garments, the clothes that carried his scent, and dressed Jacob in them. She took the skins of the young goats and covered Jacob's hands and the smooth part of his neck. She constructed a physical disguise, precise enough to pass the touch test of a blind but highly suspicious man who knew both his sons intimately. Jacob walked into his father's room. Isaac heard the voice immediately. The voice sounds like Jacob, but the hands feel like Esau. He asked directly, "Are you really my son Esau?" And Jacob looked his blind, dying father in the face and said, "I am." 3 words. The most expensive lie in the history of recorded scripture. Isaac ate, he drank, he pulled his disguised son close and inhaled the scent of Esau's garments. And then he spoke the blessing, the full patriarchal covenant transcend, the richness of the earth, authority over nations, mastery over his brothers, the complete divine inheritance activated over Jacob through deliberate, premeditated, forensically constructed identity fraud. When Esau returned, the text does not spare the reader from what followed. He cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry. 5 words in English. In the Hebrew, it is an outpouring of sound that carries decades of loss in a single moment. Esau had not just lost a legal document, he had lost the spoken word of his father over his life. He had lost the covenant identity that defined who he was in the family of God. He had lost everything, and the man who took it was his own twin brother. He said to his father, "Bless me too." Isaac told him, "Your brother came with deceit and has taken your blessing, and there was nothing left to give." Esau wept. Jacob fled the country. Now, every serious investigator must ask the closing question of every case file. Did the crime pay? The evidence is complicated, and most churches will never give you the full forensic answer. Jacob got the birthright, Jacob got the blessing, Jacob got the billion-dollar inheritance, and Jacob spent the next 20 years of his life paying for it in ways he never anticipated. He fled to his uncle Laban, and Laban, a man of equal strategic intelligence and zero moral restraint, proceeded to run the same playbook on Jacob that Jacob had run on Esau. He switched Jacob's promised wife on the wedding night. He changed Jacob's wages 10 times. He manipulated, deceived, and extracted over 2 decades of additional labor through systematic fraud. The man who built his fortune through deception spent 20 years being systematically deceived. The weapon he used became the weapon used against him. This is not coincidence. This is the forensic justice woven into the architecture of Jacob's story. The principle that the measure you use will be measured back to you with the same precision and the same devastation. Jacob got everything he wanted and lost 20 years, 2 countries, his family's peace, his brother's trust, and his own identity in the process. The evidence does not vindicate Jacob. It indicts him completely. And yet, this is the part of the case file that should stop every viewer cold. God still chose Jacob, not despite the fraud, not after Jacob cleaned up his act, not once he became worthy of the covenant. God chose Jacob while the deception was still fresh, before the consequences had fully arrived, before the 20 years of Laban's manipulation, before the wrestling match at Peniel where Jacob's hip was broken and his name was finally changed to Israel. God chose a deceiver, a manipulator, a man who looked his dying father in the face and lied without flinching, and made him the father of 12 tribes and wrote his name into eternity. Not because Jacob was righteous, but because God's purposes cannot be stopped by human failure, cannot be redirected by our worst decisions, cannot be derailed by the most calculated deception in ancient history. That is the most uncomfortable truth in this entire case file. Justice does not always look the way we think it should, and grace does not always go to the people we believe deserve it. The question this investigation leaves open is not whether Jacob was a criminal. The evidence is clear, he was. The question is what it means that God chose him anyway, and what it means for every person watching this right now who has built something, a relationship, a career, a reputation, a life, on a foundation that cannot hold the weight of what God actually wants to do through them. Jacob's story is not a blueprint for deception. It is a forensic record of what divine grace looks like when it operates in the wreckage of deeply flawed human choices. If this case file exposed a side of Genesis you have never examined before, subscribe right now. Every week on the Biblefile, we open the complete case files on the crimes, the frauds, the cover-ups, the divine verdicts, and the grace that runs through every story your church has never preached in full. Drop your verdict in the comments. Was Jacob a criminal genius or an instrument of divine purpose operating outside the boundaries of his own morality? And the harder question, do you think Esau deserved what happened to him? I read every single comment. The next case file opens next week. Do not miss it.